Here in Nigeria, micro, small, medium enterprises are of critical importance to the economy. Now, according to the NBS Bureau of Statistics and the Sweden MSME 2021 survey, they've contributed 46.3% to GDP, 6.2% to exports, 96.9% of businesses, 87.9% of employment. So that's how important they are. We have another survey to review on MSMEs in Nigeria from PwC. It's the MSME Survey 2024 called Building Resilience Strategies for MSME Success. PwC MSME survey examines some trends shaping the MSME sector, talking about navigating macroeconomic headwinds, constrained access to finance, streamlining regulations, building MSME adaptability, and my favorite at the bottom there, technology, and what that can be done to improve things. So we're going to be going through that list with our guest, Abiodun Kayode-Alli. He's an economist and also head of tax policy over at senior management at PwC. Abiodun, you're very welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Good morning to you. So I guess 50% of SMEs in your survey reported a fall in demand for their products. Is that, if I was to ask you what the triggers are, is it a pretty obvious answer?
To be honest with you, yes, it is actually. I mean, given the fact that the survey was conducted after the pandemic, right, trying to see how most of these businesses were able to cope. And it's pretty something that everyone knows, right? Given the fact that there has been a war in Europe and given the fact that prices have gone up, right, globally. So it's impacted on their businesses as well, right? Then also, if you think about the fact that a lot of people were out of jobs, right, in terms of purchasing power for consumers themselves, what consumers were doing at that point in time was to look for alternatives, right, or to see if that particular item was actually essential. So there were challenges and even some of the policies that were taken by the Nigerian government back then, which actually impacted on rising costs and insecurity as well. It's well known that inflation has been high. So these are some of the things that the MSME businesses themselves experience. So it's something even the individual as well as the businesses experienced. Yeah.
How do we build that back up? So if you've talked to these MSMEs, they've told you, oh my gosh, prices are up, people are not buying as much of my product. How do we get that back up? How do we return to where we build demand back up?
Yeah, and that's a very good question. So I can look at it from two sides, from the point of view of the businesses themselves, right? So from the point of view of the businesses, they probably need to be more strategic with respect to pricing, see how they can adjust their costs, right? If there are other ways they can source for alternatives, that would help a lot in reducing the price of the products they are selling, right? Then also, if it were possible for them, I think one thing that we must say that is very important is to ensure that they still carry out value for money, right? You don't want to reduce the price of your product in such a way that consumers are not getting value because they will just shift their demand to other alternatives, right? Then from the part of the consumers themselves, I know the federal government is taking some initiatives. There is a consumer credit scheme that is being adopted, even though it's not to the general public as of now. I think that's a good initiative. And I think categorically, if you look at the state of the economy, it will actually impact on consumers, right? So I think these are some of the things that both the producers as well as the consumers can do. And there are also some other strategies that some of these businesses can take, which I'm sure you are aware of, shrinkflation, right? Yeah. Right, whereby they just try to reduce the sizes of those products, just to look at, okay, what are the categories of consumers I'm actually serving, right? How can I meet each of those consumers' needs, right? Not everyone needs the big products, maybe something smaller, but one thing that is very key is to ensure value for money.
Your report pointed out, I think this was the IFC, International Finance Corporation, that the funding gap for MSMEs is about, 32 billion, which comes out to 13 trillion, depending on the exchange rates. Who do we turn to? I mean, you mentioned the credit scheme now, but do we turn to the banking and finance sector to try to solve that?
Yeah, to be honest, they have a huge role to play, and we've seen that some financial institutions are actually doing quite great in that regard, right? Focusing on providing credit loans to most of these MSMEs, right? But the government also has a role to play. The government is also doing its part. But I think one thing that is quite important would be awareness, right? Not every of these businesses are aware of some of these schemes that are being introduced by the financiers, by the government. Not everyone is aware of them, and from the government side, even though some of these schemes exist, how many people actually get to access them, right? So accessibility, that's one thing. So for the financials, I think one thing that is quite important is to design their own products, their own packages in such a way that it encourages these particular MSME businesses to actually take up such loans, given the high interest rates in the economy currently. So I think it will be quite key to train these MSMEs, mentor them to ensure that they are able to at least come up with something, an output that would be tenable, and they can pay back most of these loans. We don't want a situation whereby we're experiencing lots of bad loans.
Yeah, yeah. Right. Look, this electricity thing, you get worn out talking about it, yeah? But your reports put up the fact that this power issue, we had Dr. Frank Ude. He was in Rivers State. He's in the livestock sector. We were talking about poultry farming, and I asked him what was one of the largest cost pressures outside of feed. So here's what he said.
Next thing is energy. Energy is huge. Now, like I said earlier in our previous interview, you'll find out that energy is, most of the farms, like I told you earlier, are located in rural areas. And sometimes National Grid don't get to these rural areas. So you have the average farmer having to power his own electricity. So in most cases, we'll buy fuel at exorbitant rates. So we are saying, yes, some people are beginning to say, let's go into use of renewable energy and all that. But how economical is that? So yes, energy is another concern for us, major concern.
I mean, we could talk to almost anybody in any sector, right? They would say the same thing. So, funny enough, we had a really great interview on our flagship morning show today on renewable energy, CNG, and all that. But yeah, look, Abiodun, what do we do?
Yes,
this is so...
Yeah, it's what it is, yeah. Right? I don't see any business surviving without power, yeah. Right? Because power represents a significant part of their cost, a huge part of their cost. Think about even South Africa when they had issues with Eskom, right? That's their public power producer and provider. I mean, it's impacted on the economy, their GDP, from about 2% to 5%, right? And like you said, there have been reports whereby Nigeria is losing as much as $29 billion, right? And PwC has even estimated that 1 in 7 businesses, they are exiting the country as a result of poor power supply, right? So it's the same thing these businesses are facing. And the alternatives, if you think about the alternatives they are turning to, that's diesel, petrol, these are also high. I mean, the cost is actually quite material. So it's a big problem. And to be honest with you, we need to turn back to the government to see what they are doing. And we also need to look at what the private sector can do. I know the government has had several deals with Siemens, right, with respect to improving electricity supply. But to be quite honest with you, I think Nigeria will do way better if we can improve on that. If you compare Nigeria's electricity generation to other countries, right, per capita to other countries like Kenya, like Indonesia, you'll see from that report that Nigeria is way, way below these countries. Nigeria is doing somewhere within the range of 172 kilowatts, right, per capita, right, in terms of electricity generated, compared to Indonesia that is doing above 2,000, compared to South Africa that is doing above 3,000, despite their problems, right? So I think if the government can tackle that particular area, the Minister of Power, if they can tackle that area, they will, to a large extent, provide succor and relief to most of these small businesses.
You are the second person to mention the Minister of Power today. He was mentioned on the morning show on that renewable energy interview. The Bank of Family and Friends, mentioned in your reports. Is it because the Bank of Family and Friends for MSMEs, as far as capital sources, they don't charge interest, you can default on the loan, there's relationship there, there's emotions. What are they doing that banks are not doing?
To be honest with you, Rotus, if you have a financial problem, the first person you'll turn to is your family and friends, right?
Correct.
So it's a general thing,
Shout out to my sister. My sister is my ATM. She thinks she's watching right now.
All right, so it's a general thing, right? So the first primary source, based on that survey, right, most of the participants and respondents, the first they would always turn to his family and friends. And that's because, I mean, there's always flexibility when it comes to repayment. You don't have to go through any documentation, right? And it's easy to assess. And the interest rate, right? You can, instead of, I have friends who have reached out to me, right, at maybe something somewhat better, anyway, way better than what you would get from the current traditional institution. So definitely that would always be the primary source for every business, right?
Yeah. But that's not how it's supposed to be, right? We need to have a favorable interest rate environment. Again, I really love your reports. You mentioned interest rates there. considering where we are with the MPC raising rates and where inflation is, do you kiss single-digit interest rates in Nigeria goodbye until the environment changes? I mean, is that a pipe dream?
Well, to be honest with you, I think most businesses, based on that report, most businesses will, I think they'll find it difficult in terms of getting access to funds from most of these traditional institutions, right? So yeah, it's what the environment dictates at the moment, right? So I think what we should be looking out for is to look for solutions that can be created, right, by most of these development financial institutions, right? And I know there are lots of financial institutions that are designing programs and packages that can help most of these MSMEs. And I think there should be a kind of training in terms of financial management, right? Literacy, financial literacy skills. I think that's one thing that is essential at the moment. But as far as the interest rate environment is concerned, yeah, it's going to be quite high. And like I said, a lot needs to be done more with respect to awareness, with respect to what some of these government institutions are doing with respect to low interest rates. Not everyone knows about them. Not everyone can even access them. Yeah. So I think there needs to be a lot of awareness on this.
This bleeds into mortgages. We had a real estate player, a player in the real estate sector yesterday, the CEO of North Court Real Estate, and it's the same interest rate thing. I asked him about mortgages. I want you to listen to what he said.
When you look at the eventual sale prices for housing, even if someone wants to buy using a mortgage, the interest rates will still be high,
right? Because
the eventual pricing of the house is too high. And not many developers are going to take
30-year mortgage. No. They want their money tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yesterday. In fact, what most developers do as a strategy is the off-take model, which is I show you the designs, I show you the graphics, I show you the approved legal papers, and I show you the site, and you pay 50%, and then when I get to a certain point, you pay the rest, and then we complete. That's really what many developers do, and you can't blame them because of how the
economy is
and the interest rates are going.
It's all interconnected, right? I mean,
if the richest man in Africa himself could say that this high interest rate is actually killing businesses, you have to take his word for it. Exactly. I mean, you just have to take his word for it. It's what it is.
Technology, help me feel better. Technology is one of my favorite. Every Friday we focus every Friday on technology, and whatever you say now, I'm probably going to replay it on Friday morning. How are businesses adopting technology to make things more efficient for themselves and so on and so forth?
Well, I think from the responses that were received in that survey, I mean, there was a positive response. A lot of businesses, MSMEs, are actually adopting technology, and it's quite understandable. They say to every problem, there's always a silver lining. Look at the impact of the pandemic, where there was a restriction to movement, right? People just had to adopt technology in order to ensure that they were still in business, right? And even if you remember some of the cashless policy that was introduced by the government towards the end of 2022, early 2023, right, where people couldn't get access to cash in the bank, right? Yeah. So you saw a lot of people carrying out transactions online, using the digital platform. A lot of people are coming up with innovative solutions as a result of this problem. So to a good extent, there's been that acceptance and embracing of technology, right? There are even situations that we've experienced currently with the protests, right? Restricting and limiting movement. We've seen lots of people working virtually, right? Employing an hybrid system of working, and also using online collaborative tools like Google, right? So I think a lot of these businesses are actually adopting technology based on the report. And I think one of the social media tools that we've seen a lot of these businesses adopting are tools like WhatsApp, tools like Instagram, Twitter. Through these tools, they're able to sell and market their products and reach consumers far and wide. And even when the Twitter was banned for a short while, we saw the impact, right, in Nigeria. They said within 3 days, Nigeria had lost about 6 billion naira. So there is actually this wide acceptance of technology right now.
Abiodun Kayode-Alli of PwC, Senior Tax Manager, also Economist. Thank you so much. This was a great report. I enjoyed reading it. I encourage everyone to download it and check it out. Very informative. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.